Would you like to have the education, the tools, and the support to create your plan to rock retirement? If so, come join me Tuesday, November 16th at 7 p.m. Central, where I'm going to host a Rock Retirement Club open house. And we're going to show you the clubhouse and the master class, as well as answer your questions. You can learn more and register at livewithroger.com. Do you want to have the confidence to truly rock retirement? Well, I'm going to show you how on the Retirement Answer Man Show. Welcome to the show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host. I'm excited you're here. Do you realize that we just passed our 400th episode? I've been doing this for almost 8 years now, and we've hit 400 episodes, which is exciting. I'm so thankful that I started this podcast and continued it for 7.5 years because so much good has come from it. Mainly all the amazing people I get to talk with, whether it's clients or you, the listener. I get so many emails with questions or comments or words of encouragement or grammatical corrections, which is really awesome. I would say this podcast has changed my life. So I just want to thank you for allowing me to do this and for giving me the encouragement, even when you're correcting me. That's really helpful. So thank you so much. Feels like Christmas around here, by the way. In the RAM headquarters, I received a package the other day, and I got my 2022 wall calendar. Woo-hoo! Now, I don't like just any calendar. So I have it's 6 foot long, 3 feet tall, and it allows you to see all 12 months of the year in massive scale. And I use it. I put it up in RAM HQ in my office, and I map out the themes that we do for every month. And I map out my travel, whether it's business or personal, and special events like the webinars that we hold. I just love a big calendar. So I'm excited to get it on the wall. What I usually do, like right now, is I cut off all but the last 3 months of the year. And then I put the new year, in this case, 2022, next to the last 3 months of this year. So it gets even longer. It's hard to find one of these kind of calendars. Where I got mine, just FYI, I don't have a relationship with them, is newyear.net. And they spell new, N-E-U, year.net. So if you want something so massive, go check that out. Recently, I posted a video on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/retirementanswerman.com, with a chat I had with Wade Pfau about his new book, Retirement Planning Guidebook, which is amazing. Now, it will show up as a podcast episode next month. So you'll hear it on the podcast, but if you want to see it, you can go to YouTube right now. I was experimenting. Normally, they'll be everywhere. But on that, I mentioned a few times something called the minimum dignity floor. And Jim and Chris from the Retirement and IRA show evidently called me out on that because that's their phrase. They have been using that phrase, minimum dignity floor, for a while, and they had not heard it mentioned elsewhere. And a member of the Rock Retirement Club, or online community and course, shot me an email and said, "Hey, man, they're giving you a little grief because you didn't give them the credit for it." All in jest. And so I promised them that I would. I told them via email, it's like, "Hey guys, sorry I didn't give you credit. I just love the term and I started using it and it was just on the fly. But yeah, that is your term. So I'm going to give you some credit for that." So if you haven't checked out the Retirement and IRA show with Jim and Chris, you should do so. They are very competent, excellent practitioners, and they have a great show. And they can teach you a little bit more about the minimum dignity floor. And maybe we'll do that in 2022, have them on the show to talk about that. So I wanted to give them that shout out. So today is a listener question day. So we're going to answer questions from Susan on pensions, and who else we have here? Gina on HSAs, and I am on the dark side of creditor protection. But if you have a question for the show, you can go to rogerwhitney.com/ask Roger and submit your question in writing, or you can leave an audio question, which we always love, and we'll answer it on the show. And because we split the show up, we can answer more and more as time goes on. So with that, let's get on to your questions. Our first question comes from Susan. So Susan says, I have a pension starting at age 65 with different options for payments, depending on whether it's for my life only or from myself and my spouse. And Susan says she's a healthy female, 57 years old. Her husband is 61 years old. And statistically, she says that he'll probably pass before her, which is true. However, my advisor automatically told me to choose the lesser amount that would continue for the life of myself and the surviving spouse, rather than the higher amount that would stop when I die. Susan says, since the amount of the pension is relatively small and would be considered fun money, why wouldn't I take the higher amount that lasts for my lifetime rather than the smaller? I do feel, so she wants to know if she's right in her thinking, by the way. And she said, I do feel that the advisor didn't really give this much consideration as to our specific situation and just gave a knee-jerk standard response. Love the show, Susan. Let's unpack this, Susan. So first off, for those of you like Susan that has a pension benefit that you'll have to choose at some point, let me explain what Susan's talking about. When you go to choose your pension and turn it on, you're going to have a number of options, and it could be 5 or 6 different options. And if you're married, even more. So the basic option is, what if you just took it for your life? So in this case, if Susan took her life only, and I'm just going to make up numbers here because Susan didn't share numbers. Let's assume if it was for Susan's life, she said, I want to receive my $2,600 a month payment for my life only. And so what that means is when Susan turns that on, she's going to receive $2,600 a month. And then as soon as Susan passes away, the money goes away. So in this case, if Susan turned it on, and let's say she passed away 2 months after she received the pension, she would have received $2,600 a month for 2 months. And then if she passes, there's nothing left for anybody. And that usually will pay you the higher monthly amount. Now, conversely, and this is what Susan's talking about, the advisor suggested, well, why don't you do it for your life and your husband? So in that case, what would happen is rather than get, say, $2,600 a month, Susan and her husband might get $2,400 a month. So $200 a month less. But if Susan dies, say 2 months after retirement, that $2,400 a month payment will continue for the rest of his life. And then once he passes, it goes away entirely. And so, and her comment was that the knee-jerk reaction from her advisor was take the lesser amount or the joint life option. There are also other options available, one called, say, joint life with 10 years certain. So that means that if Susan takes a the joint life with 10 years certain, let's say Susan gets $2,300 a month. And then if she dies, the husband gets $2,300 a month. But if he dies, say in year 2, the pension would pay out for another 8 years to the descendants or to the estate. So you at least recoup some of the funds. So these are some of the decisions that you'll have to navigate. And so, Susan, you really bring up 2 different issues. One is, what is the right pension option for you? And obviously, I'm not going to be able to recommend which one's right for you. You don't have near enough information. Getting to the right answer is going to involve a lot of factors. One is the rest of your finances. How important is this pension in the scheme of things? And generally, the way that I would evaluate this is get to a feasible plan, saying your life only, and then create a what if scenario that if you were to predecease your husband, in this case, what would happen to your husband? Because let's think about it. You create a what if scenario. And if you chose a life only pension, it lasts only for your life. Well, that would go away. So he wouldn't receive that payment. And he also wouldn't receive your portion of Social Security. And then you can estimate, or once you create this what if scenario, you can compare it and say, oh, wow, he would be a little bit more constrained or stressed financially if he didn't have the pension payment plus my Social Security payment. And that will help tease out what might be the better decision for you. Now, in your case, because this is funny money, maybe relatively a small amount, it could potentially make sense to, hey, pay me more now so we can use that extra money to fund our lifestyle. And it might make sense also if they give you the option to evaluate do I just get a lump sum? If this is a funny money amount from a pension standpoint, you may decide, hey, it's only going to be $200 a month regardless. If they will just give me a lump sum, I don't have to hassle with getting $200 a month. I can have that money come into my IRA, which I could use for other things. As a quick aside, I'm sitting here and Sherlock, my Great Dane, he's about 7 years old. He likes to sleep by my chair and the dude is just snoring away. Sherlock, why so loud, man? It must be allergy season or something. Anyway, sorry, Susan. But the key here, I think, Susan, is just to evaluate them against your retirement plan of record, because there won't be a perfect solution, right? I don't know the health of your husband. You say you're relatively healthy, or if your husband has a shorter life expectancy based on genetics or family situation or health or whatever, then that could help lead you one direction or the other. But I think the key point here is your comment about your advisor, that they didn't give it consideration, at least that you saw, because they may have. They just may not have communicated it to you. Generally, from a planner perspective, so I'm putting my financial planner hat on, I am a big fan of maximizing lifetime income sources when they're available. So Social Security would be one of those. That is a really valuable annuity that adjusts for inflation that will never go away as long as you're living. And it has a survivor aspect to it. And you'd be very, very hard pressed to try to recreate that purchasing on your own. Likewise, with a pension, although they're typically not inflation adjusted, trying to create that income payment on your own, usually you can't do very easily. And the more you have these guaranteed payments, the more optionality you have with the rest of your assets. Meaning that you could perhaps spend some more of your assets early on, or you might be able to invest more aggressively with your assets because you have these guaranteed payments coming in. So there is a bent to trying to maximize these lifetime income sources that you want to be real careful about, because right now you're 57, you're healthy, you're blowing and going, life is great, but having these income sources can help be a big easy button for you later in life when maybe you're not so healthy, you're not so blowing and going, or you just don't want to deal with this stuff. It's a good easy button to have these income sources. Now, I don't know whether your advisor thought through all that or not, but I think from my perspective, that might have been where he or she was coming from. That said, this is a small little problem that I think you should address. Your advisor may have done some analysis in the background that they didn't communicate to you to come to this decision, or maybe it was knee-jerk. Maybe they thought, it's a small amount, it's funny money, just get the joint life and don't worry about it. The key is I think you need to address that to see, because at the end of the day, your advisor should be a thinking partner to help create these what-if scenarios so you can think about these decisions in an organized way and in a collaborative way. And it sounds like it definitely wasn't in a collaborative way, and it may not have been in an organized way unless they did some work that they just didn't communicate to you to get to that decision. That's an important thing that you want to address, because if it was knee-jerk and it wasn't in an organized way, that is a small fracture in the relationship potentially. So that's the big thing I would address. But if it's funny money, I'm not opposed to just cleaning it up and getting the most you can, whether it's in a lump sum or if it's not going to impact the feasibility to plan to get the higher payout. Just understand the decision you're making, then be comfortable with it. Now, our next question comes from Gina on health savings accounts after age 65. Hey, Roger, I love your podcast. I will turn 65 in December of 2021. Awesome. Medicare. That's a good thing. And I'm going to continue working for a few more years. I have a high deductible healthcare policy through work, and I contribute to an HSA. I've heard that as long as I don't, A, take Social Security, and B, don't sign up for Medicare, even Part A, that I should be okay continuing to contribute to my HSA. I recently got bombarded by invitations to learning about Medicare classes, and one said that there are tricky rules about contributing to HSA past 65. I don't want to mess this up. Can you help me clarify? Well, when it comes to navigating Medicare, I would suggest you talk to Boomer Benefits. They have been a trusted source for me in my practice and with clients and with friends of the show. I have no financial arrangement with them. I just think they do great work. But the rules are complicated, Gina. And getting them wrong could lead to a gap in coverage or lifetime penalties on your Parts B and D premiums. So you definitely want to get that right. You are correct that if you sign up for Social Security, you will automatically get Medicare Part A and no longer be eligible to contribute to your HSA. Some of this, Gina, is going to be dependent upon what your employer is going to require. Some are going to require you to sign up for Part B at age 65 in case you will need to take the appropriate action, and that will probably impact your HSA contributions. For example, if you turn, say, 65 in July and your employer requires you to sign up for Medicare, this means that you can only make a half-year contribution to your HSA while you were covered by that plan and then switched over to Medicare. If your employer doesn't require you sign up for Medicare, then you can continue down the checklist. For anyone whose healthcare plan, Gina, is through the marketplace, let's say you retired early, or a retiree plan, you can't choose deferring signing up for Medicare, so you'll have to stop your HSA contributions. But in your case, Gina, if you aren't taking Social Security and you don't have to sign up for Medicare due to the way your employer's group healthcare plan is structured, then you can continue to have your high deductible healthcare policy and contribute to your HSA. Now, there's the next catch comes when you go to retire. There's a look back period for 6 months before you retire, during which you cannot have HSA contributions, regular or catch up, by you or your employer. So this doesn't apply if you're under 65. So say you're going to retire at 65 in 4 months. You don't have to go back and count the time when you're 64. But the key here is you can only contribute to your HSA for the portion of the months for the year where you looked for the whole month and that month was not in the look back period. You can see how complicated this stuff gets. So my suggestion would be to navigate this is talk to a Medicare provider or navigator, better word, because government provides Medicare, such as Boomer Benefits or one that you find locally. And also talk to your healthcare coverage at work to understand what they're going to require when you turn 65. And that will get you on your way to figuring this all out. Now, our next question comes from IM. So that's what we're going to call him. IM says, love the podcast. More recent versions about life and less financial stuff. The financial stuff is everywhere, but the life part, especially for Gen Xers, is hard to find. Sounds great having this all the time and not having to work for the man, but there are intrinsics of work that we don't realize sometimes. IM's question on financial risk management. Specifically, what are the risks of rolling over an ERISA, employer-sponsored retirement account, like a 401k, into an IRA compared to keeping them at the employer? So think about that. You have a 401k plan, which is covered by ERISA, which is the federal regulations by the Department of Justice that regulate corporate retirement plans. So your more geeky fellows out there, Employer Retirement Income Security Act is what ERISA stands for, and it governs, say, 401ks. So IM is talking about the creditor protection that you get. So what do we mean by that? Well, somebody slips and falls on your property and they sue you for above whatever limits you have on your insurance, and they win a judgment against you to get your money in your bank account, etc. Or you've become liable for something. What assets can they actually go get? So that's essentially what IM is talking about. So under the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, if you have 401k assets, they are generally protected from seizures by creditor, which means if you're the subject of a lawsuit, they can't get that retirement account. And there's no upper limit on how much those accounts can be. They could be $10 million in a 401k. Nobody can make you get them. Nobody can make you take them out to give them to them, even a judgment from a court. But like you, many people want to roll their money to an IRA account, individual retirement account, when they separate service or retire. And some of the positives of rolling the money from a 401k would be that maybe there are higher fees, you want to diversify your assets, you want to take over management, etc. And you want better investment choices. Some of the negatives to say rolling out of a 401k is you no longer get this full creditor protection, and perhaps you lose the benefit of, say, a stable value fund, etc. So if 401ks and ERISA covered plans are protected in a robust way from, say, creditors, what about IRAs? Well, the creditor protection on IRAs is state dependent, so it can vary widely. Everything from no creditor protection to relatively complete coverage with a lot of little twists. So you're subject to the rules of your state rather than the federal rules. In my 25 years of navigating these kind of questions, even with clients that have a lot of exposure to credit risks because of the professions they happen to do, maybe lots of real estate deals or private partnerships or business or even doctors, I've never seen an instance where this became an issue. So you're going to have to decide for yourself, how important is this uber credit protection relative to what is offered by your state? And is there enough pros in moving it to an IRA that outweigh that remote risk, right? Because this is definitely one of those tail risks. Speaking of creditor protection or just risk management, maybe that should be a theme for 2022 where we talk about risk management in retirement, whether it's creditor protection or cybersecurity, et cetera. I'll have to put that down. So hopefully that helps give you some framework. My suggestion would be, if you're concerned about this with your, say, 401k, first step would be to check what the rules are in your state. And that will help give you more information of, hey, maybe you have robust coverage in your state, and this really isn't an issue at all. And in that case, you don't have to worry about it near as much. One caveat there is, once you roll it out of a 401k and close that 401k down, you can't go back into the 401k. So you're going to have some issues there. So you just want to feel comfortable, one, at what is the probability or possibility of the risk, and then what's the severity based on the rules in your state. All right, let's go on to one more question from Daniel on Roth conversions. So Daniel has a number of questions regarding Roth conversions. Daniel says, love your show, discovered it a couple of weeks ago and have been binge listening. Well, welcome, Daniel. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Daniel says, I am 56 years old and just retired. Huzzah! That's awesome. My wife and I have a majority of our assets in tax-deferred investments, 401ks, IRAs, profit-sharing KEO, etc. About $2 million in tax-deferred accounts, another $600,000 in other after-tax investment assets, and about $80,000 in an HSA. He says he's now digging into receipts to have the flexibility on withdrawals. It's a good idea for his HSA. We'll talk a little bit about that. Our income level this year is pushing us into a high tax bracket, so I am maxing out pre-tax contributions wherever I can. But next year will be a different story. After listening to several podcasts in the past week, I'm considering a conversion of some of my tax-deferred investments into a Roth IRA to give me more flexibility in how I pull income. And then he has some related questions. One, if I convert money from an IRA or 401k before 59 and a half, will I have to pay a penalty? Will I need to pull money from non-tax deferred accounts to pay the tax liability? Given my age, should I defer Social Security? Lots of questions. So let's go through this, Daniel, because I think a lot of people are facing the same situation you have. So you've recognized one really important thing. Starting next year, you have this window when you can manage, probably more than you have ever before, how you realize taxable income. It's important to realize that. And it looks like you got a good runway because you retired early. Congratulations. So you're going to have to make some decisions here on what you're trying to solve for. Are you trying to solve for ACA or Affordable Care Act subsidies, which can be very substantial? If you and your spouse, you could literally save 20 plus thousand a year if you choose to have a very low income level. Traditionally it's 400% above the poverty level, and take those ACA subsidies. Or do you want to solve for this required minimum distribution time bomb, we'll call it? That's a big term. Instead, and you're not going to get to a perfect answer here, Daniel. And in fact, I think it was last week, could be this week, that Andy Panko and I talked about this on the video, the YouTube portion of this show, which we released as a normal podcast as well. So you may be informed a little bit from there, as well as the conversation I had with Wade Pfau on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/retirement answer man. That show will be released as a podcast here next month. There's a weird timing just because of experimentation on my part. So you might want to listen to those 2 episodes because we address this on what do you solve for. But let's go through some of your questions. First off, Roth conversions can be done before 59 and a half without an age-based penalty. You could be 20 years old and do a Roth IRA conversion and not pay that 10% penalty. So you're okay there. Now, in regards to your 401k may or may not allow you to do Roth conversions. Most probably don't. So you'll need to do those from typically an IRA, but you can check out your plan documents in your 401k to see if there's an option there. And do be careful if you transfer money from a 401k to an IRA that you do it as a trustee to trustee transfer or a direct rollover. Essentially what that means is your 401k plan will send the check directly to your IRA, so it never goes into your name. That way you don't have any tax issues there. Now, any Roth conversions that you do, you are going to owe the tax on it. And it's highly desirable that you use your after-tax assets to pay that tax. Because in your case, if you're under 59 and a half, if you have to take out extra money to pay the tax, you are going to have the 10% penalty on that. And also just the math works much better if you're able to pay with it from after-tax assets. Now, in your case, you're going to be retiring. I'm assuming you retired after age 56. So you may be able to use what's called the rule of 55 to avoid that early withdrawal penalty. If you're a member of the Rock Retirement Club, we have a financial basics on that where we explain how to utilize the rule of 55. And I'm sure we've answered questions on the show as well, so you can check that out. But you really want to know what you're solving for here, I think, Daniel. So you should have a plan of record. And generally, when I'm evaluating doing Roth conversions, one of the first things I want to know is, well, what is my funding plan for my retirement? How much money will I need to draw from these tax-deferred accounts just to help pay the bills because of other sources? So that's one. I want to know, am I going to be taking money out to cover life expenses anyway? Because that will help reduce the amounts in those accounts. Although, as young as you are, and with as much money you have in those accounts, that might not put a dent in it, assuming we have normal type of growth over the years. Second is, I want to do a rough estimate of what will be the required minimum distributions from my tax-deferred accounts when I'm 72. Usually what I'll do is I'll take year by year the assets that I have in tax-deferred accounts, less the withdrawals in whatever given year because I'm using it to fund lifestyle, put a 5% growth rate on the remaining assets. I just build a spreadsheet and then look at what would be the required minimum distribution at age 72 if I just went with that plan. Because that will help you see, oh man, I'm probably going to run up the income tax brackets pretty quickly because of the growth on this assets. And that might help you tease out whether that may be a bigger fish to fry than, say, get subsidies on your healthcare through the credit. Once you have your base plan of record, then you can model each one of these to say, okay, well, what if I convert money or at least take money out of tax deferred accounts up to the 22% bracket or the 24% tax bracket? How does that impact the feasibility of my plan? And where does that leave me with RMDs later on? And does it actually give me more flexibility? And the only way I know how to do that is to create a plan of record of, say, the traditional plan of take all your after-tax money and then take your IRA money and so forth. And once I have that plan of record of how I'm going to fund retirement, Daniel, then you can create a what-if scenario showing taking money out of, say, IRAs just to pay for life So you're decreasing that amount or taking money out to do Roth conversions or some combination and see the long-term impact. If you do that, that's going to put you in a much better position to make the judgment call. Whenever Andy Panko and I talk about this, we tend to agree that it's usually the answer is somewhere in the middle, either taking money out of pre-tax accounts up to the 22 to 24% bracket and or doing Roth conversions. And in your case, it sounds like you have enough assets there that a somewhere in between strategy may give you the flexibility that you desire. So hopefully that gave you at least a basic framework for how to approach this. Now, let's go to your health savings account quickly, because we talk a lot about health savings accounts, which are accounts that if you have a high deductible health insurance policy, you can contribute to and receive a tax deduction. And as long as those monies are withdrawn for qualified health care expenses, you don't own any tax on any of the gains or any of the monies at all. And a popular strategy for people is to contribute to a health savings account at the maximum amount they can. And if you're younger, invest the money fairly aggressively and treat it like it's a long-term growth asset, like say a Roth IRA, and then just never tap it in order to build up this tax-free slush fund for healthcare expenses later on in life. That's the strategy that I use personally. And there's this quirk currently with health savings accounts, doesn't mean it can't be closed, that when you say have a surgery, let's say you have a $5,000 bill for surgery today, you could use monies in your health savings account to take a distribution to pay for that $5,000 bill. But right now, there's actually no time frame in when you have to do it. So if you had that $5,000 qualified healthcare expense today, you could actually get reimbursed for it 10 years from now or 20 years from now. And so the idea is to make sure that you log your expenses that are unreimbursed from a qualified healthcare expense. And as you do this over time, as we generally have these healthcare expenses, we can have the ability to submit our receipts whenever we want to, if we need to get money, and have it come out from a tax-free basis. And that's essentially what Daniel referred to when he said he was combing for all of his healthcare receipts. So a good practice here, Daniel and everybody, is to have both the explanation of benefits that you receive and the original receipt of you paying this bill, and keep a log of the explanation of benefits plus you paying the invoice. That's going to put you in really good ground that you have the appropriate paperwork. So explanation of benefits and the original receipt of your payment of this, start to keep a log of that. And at least under current code, you'll be able to get reimbursed from your health savings account fairly easily. So if you have a question for the show, you can go to rogerwhitney.com/ask Roger. Really enjoying this Q&A only episode. Gives us a lot more room to talk about it. Hopefully you enjoy it too. And with that, I hope you have a great weekend. Hey, it's time for that all-important disclaimer. We so appreciate you listening to the show and love your questions and love the teaching that we're able to provide here. And actually, it helps us too. But remember, you're not our clients.
Not love it if you took advice from us on the show.
We would not love it if you took advice from us on the show. Realize this is helpful in education. Talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor before you make any decisions.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.